I'm going to speak today about the COREPACE Research Partnership and some of the work that we do with the core districts. It's a consortium of school districts here in California, 8 districts that serve over 1 million kids. And it's a really different way of coming at the idea of teacher quality than what Jason talked about, where what these districts are working on and what we're helping them work on is the system that surrounds teaching and instruction. So the system at the district level, the system at the school level, and trying to improve those conditions as a way to improve teaching and learning. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time here talking about our research partnership, just by way of some context about the work that we do. So like what Jason was saying, the COREPACE Research Partnership is focused on smarter policy and practice, but also in our case, continuous improvement for these districts. And what that means is that they're engaged in collaborative work together, and they look to our partnership to be able to inform the kinds of work that they both are doing, the things they're doing well, and the areas where they could stand to improve. On this regard, what we do is we share lessons learned, we share tools and resources, best practices, and original research that's unique to these districts. Some of this work is more traditional research, but a lot of it we try to put this spin so that it's useful directly to decision makers within the systems. We do this through a combination of quantitative and qualitative analysis that we work through in cycles. So the quantitative analysis helps us to uncover patterns in data, to explore variation, and to analyze outcomes. And the qualitative data lets us dig in a little bit to understand implementation, to highlight these kinds of promising practices, and to explain the variation that we see across the data system. There's 3 pillars of our work with these districts. The first, and this is this is the part I'll be talking about today, is developmental evaluation of CORE's networked improvement community. And so this kind of developmental evaluation is both formative and summative, lets us get in there and give feedback about their collaboration, but then extract lessons for the field more broadly. The second is original quantitative research by our central research team. This is a team of researchers at universities here in California. And then the third is a broad set of studies that many of you in this room actually are engaged in by folks that we call the PACE affiliates. And these are people all across the state who work with this data to enact studies of mutual interest. We work with a really broad network of researchers here across the state, top to bottom. And I'm going to then now transition into talking about what the core districts are and what they're doing, and I'll share with you a bit about what we're learning from the qualitative evaluation. So there's 8 districts in core. It's Fresno, Garden Grove, Los Angeles Unified, Long Beach Unified, Oakland, Sacramento, San Francisco, and Santa Ana. And these are big urban school districts, which is part of how they came together in the first place. They have particular problems of practice that maybe a 5,000 student district doesn't experience. And so they came together and are best known for their No Child Left Behind waiver. They organized as an accountability system and built a shared measurement system. Now they've transitioned, with the transition out of No Child Left Behind, into a networked improvement community. So what that means is that they're using the tools of improvement science, and we'll get into this a little bit in a second, to talk about how they could use data and collaboration to advance student outcomes with a particular angle toward equity in their systems. So like most big urban districts, these systems experience really large gaps in achievement on multiple measures. And this is a large focus of the work that we've done, is highlighting a lot of these gaps along multiple measures. And so their sense was, we've been working to close these gaps through various theories of action, like accountability, like standards implementation, for a long time. And we're not seeing any closure in those gaps. So what could we do to work together that would actually enable us to take a different approach to closing achievement gaps? The measures that they use and share are kind of the traditional state measures, like student test results, EL progress, chronic absenteeism, suspension, and graduation. But they also survey all students in the districts in grades 4 through 12 on social emotional learning. This is something that the leaders in these districts believe is a fundamental goal of education, and so they've measured those pieces. They also create an academic growth measure at the school level that's central to their conversations. They measure student, parent, and staff culture and climate, and then report that at the school level as part of their school performance metric. and are also creating some college and career readiness indicators. So it's a really robust data system that they bring into this work. Now, the context in which they work is a networked improvement community. And this is really centered around Carnegie's 6 principles, for those of you that are familiar with that. So the elements of this are to be problem-focused and user-centered. And what that means is to take a different approach to solving problems than has typically been the case in these districts, where you say, we have an EL redesignation problem. Here's a curriculum for that. Here's a package for that. Here's a support system for that. But to really dig in deeply to understand the problem that they're experiencing before they work on solutions. The second is variability. So instead of saying, on average, our kids are doing X, to look at variation by grade, to look at variation by school. The next is seeing the system. And that's really related to this problem focus, but it's central to the work that these districts are doing, where you need to understand that everything that's happening in your system, all of the variations we see in teacher quality, all of the variations that we see in school quality or student achievement, are system problems. There are aspects of that that are driven by the district. There are aspects of that that are driven by the schools. And so thinking about the levers that you can pull within your systems to improve those outcomes is a different way of thinking about it than they've typically been thinking about it before. Finally, embracing measurement, learning through disciplined inquiry. So this means these two are related, and it's related to their multiple measure system. It's to use that data to engage in regular cycles of evaluation, and this is something that we help them with. So instead of having a 1, 2, 3 year period of research, we work with them on really short cycles of research to inform their thinking. And then finally, to organize these networks where you can share things across. So some of the assumptions behind this kind of continuous improvement approach, and this is really important for the work that I'll be telling you next, is that you take a systems perspective. You're very process-oriented, and so you think through all of the aspects of implementation as well in your theory of evaluation. You're using a disciplined methodology to solve problems, which involves these kind of regular cycles of inquiry where you set goals using data, where you create an action plan or intervention, where you implement or act on that plan, then you assess the results. So some of these things are natural to us that do research, but they're not necessarily natural to the folks in districts that are implementing this. And then finally, you use the results of that research and evaluation to reflect and adjust plans. And then the final piece is thinking about the front line. This is a modification from outside of education, from industry, but thinking about the front line, your teachers, your students, as key actors in your system improvement. So CORE right now is in the process they're right now in the first year of actually going into schools and working on changes. They spent a really long time trying to diagnose their system and understand the system elements that were contributing to the problems that they were seeing. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But in their journey, the way that this will work is that as they engage with schools, they dig in a particular place to develop changes in response to the problems that they've seen, test those for efficacy, and then work to spread those across the network. And so this is a key part of our work with them, is helping them to know if something's been effective, but then also to think about how the process of rollout is playing out within their network. So the role of research within a structure like this, as the districts engage in this kind of plan, do, study, act cycle, research comes into play at different points here. So as the districts are doing their planning, as they're thinking about the changes to introduce, we do original research to support the identification of their own improvement priorities and to identify best practices that are potential ideas to spread. As they're working on implementation, we document that process within districts and schools and aggregate lessons across the different types of work that are going on. And we highlight areas of improvement or success in either process or outcomes. So schools that seem to be doing something well, and also schools that have achieved a particular change in outcomes. As they're engaged in the study, we help them to do that kind of impact analysis and evaluation. And then finally, as they're moving into the next phase of spread, we do our developmental evaluation and quick reporting to help them think through, as they're acting, how all of these pieces are playing out. So this is the piece that I'm going to dig into now here, and just tell you a little bit about some of the things we've learned in our qualitative work with these districts in their first year of implementation of their networked improvement community, and how we've shared some of these things with a broader audience. This is based on a report that's on our PACE website that you guys can check out if anyone's interested. So the first thing that we learned in their work is that it's really important to have a strong team when doing this kind of leadership work at the district and school level. And I know this might seem obvious, but we work in environments where many departments are siloed. So people that work on teachers work in HR, people that work on principals work in school supervision. And the idea of stepping back and saying, how do these systems operate together, actually requires getting all of the same people sitting at a table to think about how their system is playing out. And so this was a huge lift for them because many of the people, we asked the districts to bring in people who worked across different areas, and many of them had never worked together at all. So there's a lot of new norms that needed to be built for them to communicate. But once they built those relationships, it was enabling conditions for them to continue to collaborate in potentially more meaningful ways moving forward. So some of the things we heard here, one of the folks we interviewed said, I feel like there's more potential for us to be able to solve a problem, to identify redundancies, and to be more efficient. I feel like it gives us better leverage. We're not working on 6 different things. We're actually working on one thing together. And I think it builds confidence in us organizationally. Another person said, when we work well together and utilize each other's strengths and make those weaknesses disappear because of the meshing of the teams and the expertise, it becomes a really powerful thing. The next thing that we learned is around analysis and around the importance of a variety of data sources when people are doing this work of really understanding their system. So the core data system has a wide range of quantitative measures, and those are really important in helping to highlight gaps and helping them to see that a problem at a school level might not be a school level problem, but might be a 6th grade problem, or might be a problem with a couple of teachers. And so that kind of data helps them to get in there, but it doesn't tell them anything about why they're experiencing the kind of problems that they're experiencing. And a lot of the tools that they were given in this system analysis process were qualitative. So they were given protocols to go into schools and interview teachers and students and parents to say, why do you feel like you're not doing well in math? And as their evaluator, what we saw was that process really changed the way that they thought about the problem, where at the beginning they might have said, this is a teacher pipeline problem. To when they started going through, they said, they experienced a huge problem of bias. A lot of these schools serve huge proportions of African American or Hispanic Latino kids. And they found that a lot of these teachers, the vast majority of them in some of the schools actually, were experiencing a lot of bias, and they couldn't say, we just need to hire new teachers. They needed to think about how can we address these issues of bias head on to improve the systems in which these people work. And so that variety of data was really powerful for them, and built a lot of their understanding. And finally, in this kind of work where people are trying to learn how to do their jobs differently, it was really important that they had expert facilitation in doing this work. So coaches, data experts, because people in schools are not used to taking a systems approach. People in districts are not used to thinking about their role in service to schools, which is a really different conceptualization of the work. And so having experts who could work with them to help them see how they might approach a problem differently, how they might set a conversation differently, was really important. So just a couple of reflections. This year, the districts now are working in the school level. And so we're just beginning our qualitative work this year, trying to understand how that's playing out. And one of the things that we're seeing here is that as the work has moved to the school level, the districts that are implementing this well themselves are experiencing a really important mindset shift away from I do things to schools and into thinking about the schools are in the driver's seat for improvement. How can I orient my role differently to support them in doing that? And so this work, and it's in a very small number of schools right now, but this work is elevating the role of teacher leaders and of principals in the schools to be able to think about how they can build structures and collaboration and resources to advance student achievement in a lasting way. So, thank you.